Hello and welcome everybody to today's video and to my 2019 Canadian Grand Prix reaction video. So there's a lot to talk about from this one. We're going to start from FP1 and sort of work through the weekend and then talk about the race and ultimately the controversy surrounding it near the end. So FP1 was a great time. I was watching from just after the corner where Giovinazzi spun and hit the wall, and I actually saw that event happen just when I got there. I had just got through the gates and found that spot right next to where I came in and saw the spin and the incident there, and that was a good spot to watch from. FP1 looks solid. I thought Latifi stood out as being solid in the car, and I had talked in the last video about the rumor about him replacing Kubica, and because he doesn't have the super license points, which is something I didn't know, that won't be a possibility, at least not for a little while. But Kubica did look off all weekend, and I'll get to him in a minute. And also on Friday, I made my way up. I was kind of walking all around the track trying to determine the best spot to watch from on race day. And I was watching the Pirelli hot laps, and you've probably seen the highlights of the groundhogs on the track. Raikkonen almost hit one, Latifi almost hit one. The Pirelli Hot Laps challenge that they had some McLaren supercars, some of the new Mercedes, taking people who probably paid an exorbitant amount of money on hot laps around the track. And one of those new, I think it was a McLaren 600 LT, almost caught the groundhog coming out of turn 2. The thing was running all over the place, and the cost is just running through my head, how much it would cost to repair that damage. Just absolutely insane. So after FP1, I moved to the outside of turn 6 for most of FP2, and that seemed to be a great spot to watch from. And that would end up being the spot that I watched the race from. Because you get to see the cars slow down and switch back, you really get to see the quality of the car, how well it's turning, and how much control the driver has through it. And that's sort of where Kubica stood out over the weekend, is every time he came into the corner, he seemed to have trouble finding the right gear, and then in the corner, he just couldn't seem to get the car turned as quickly as others. A lot of the faster drivers would snap the car right back, and it was quick. Kubica almost had hesitation, where he would snap to multiple sides. There wasn't too much from FP2. I know Hamilton had the incident where I was watching FP1 from, so I did miss that, which was unfortunate, but that would have been something that I wanted to see. On the Saturday, the FP3, you could really tell they were starting to get a little bit more feel in the track. I know it was extremely dirty over the first 2 practices, and they really started to find that pace, and you could see the qualifying pace coming out. And up until that point, the McLarens had looked really good. Before the race, I had predicted that the McLarens would have a great weekend, and they were up until that point. Pretty much everything that I said in my preview came true, but all in the first 3 practices. Hamilton had an incident and was out of FP2. The McLarens looked great. It really seemed like all my predictions were coming true, but because they were all coming true so quickly, I knew we're going to have a little bit of drama in the race here. And the qualifying, again, Lance Stroll, horrible in qualifying, really not great throughout the weekend. I know the FP3 engine explosion had a lot to do with that, but he didn't really look great up until the race. He really made up for it in the race, but also looked off, just wasn't really in it. And the qualifying turned out to be pretty exciting. You had the Magnussen incident, obviously costing Grosjean, who looked to have good pace, a lot of his ability to qualify for Q3, and then Max Verstappen being thrown out of position. And then you had the Bottas spin in Q3, which ruined the set of soft tires that he was trying to qualify on and really put Mercedes, at least his car, on the back foot. They had already had the incident with Hamilton, and now they have that spin that ruins Bottas's qualifying. So that was really interesting, the way that turned out. And the Ferrari obviously getting the pole position was a massive surprise and something that felt refreshing. And I think a lot of the animosity towards this weekend has to do with that. I mean, this felt fresh, it felt exciting, it felt like there was finally a fight, and the FIA turns around and says, no fight here. And I think deep down, that's a lot of what's going on with the fans right now and why they're so upset, and we'll definitely get into that. So the race itself started out all right. There were no crazy incidents. There was the loss of the front wing by Albon, and then the replays of Grosjean throwing the pieces of carbon fiber out of the cockpit that was interesting. And Lance Stroll had an incredible race, like I was saying, really made up for what was again looking like a disappointing weekend. I think a lot of the guy's problems are that he can't qualify to save his life. Like I said, I know he was hampered by that engine issue in FP3, but the guy, he just cannot qualify, ever. It's been, like, I think 2 years since he's made it out Q1, and that's just not acceptable, especially when you're in more of a midfield car like the Force India that's expected to bring the fight every weekend. But he looked to have the pace the whole time. The McLarens looked really off, and I know they were having massive brake overheating problems, as a lot of the cars were, evidenced by Norris's spectacular retirement. That was confusing because you didn't really know if he had hit the wall, and it was hard to see the replay, and eventually you just said, okay, maybe something just broke, which when I watched the race again turned out to be the case. I guess his brake had overheated to the point of melting the suspension, and Sainz looked to really suffer later in the race. He started out okay, and then he just seemed to fall off further and further as the race went on, and I think a lot of that was the overheating issues. And then you had the incident, and we'll discuss this for a little bit. A lot of what could be said has already been said, so there's not a whole lot to deep dive into, but I will give my thoughts on it. When it first happened, everybody in the crowd was shocked, and I was answering a lot of questions for people in the crowd because my dad was next to me and he was sort of asking questions about the penalty. There were a lot of other people around me who started asking about the penalty. They were confused as to the nature of it. A lot of them were, I would say, maybe fans that are kind of casual or maybe taking in their first event. But when you have that many people all scratching their heads and that many people are willing to ask someone that they've never met about rules and regulations surrounding this, I think that you've done something wrong. And if something is obvious and glaring, people should be able to say, okay, yeah, that was dangerous, that's why that's a penalty. But when you're trying to grow a sport in North America, especially when the NHL is taking so much heat right now for the poor quality of the refereeing in its championship games, that's hurting the NHL and it's making it look like a joke. And I think that for the casual fan in North America, which is who the FIA are really trying to appeal to, something like this makes no sense. And if it doesn't make sense to a casual fan, it shows you that it's probably not the right way to go. Obviously, you don't want casual fans deciding the sport, but if you want to grow it, you have to make things obvious and standardized and easy to watch and easy to follow along with. And there was so much confusion. There was a lot of anger too. Right away, a lot of the fans started booing. It was clear that there was a disengagement. I've read some comments online from people who were there who said that they just walked out. And as a longtime racing fan, I can kind of understand that. I don't think that that's the right way to do it. There are better ways to handle it, and I don't think booing Hamilton at the end of the race is the right thing either. I think this is just simply a stewarding error. People were asking about the booing later on when Hamilton was on the podium. When the drivers were doing their parade lap, the grandstand was just pouring boos down on Hamilton. When they did the grid introductions and which cars placed where, when they mentioned Hamilton, everybody was booing him. So there was already some, I'll say, animosity there towards Hamilton. I don't mind the guy. I think he's annoyingly good. He's like a Schumacher in the sense that when you're watching, he's just that much better than almost anybody else on any given weekend, that it's annoying how much he wins and how well he does. And he has his fans and he has his detractors, but a lot of that comes down to get this guy off the top step. And he deserves it. I mean, he earns it every race. Maybe not this one, but he did put in an incredible drive the whole race. And if he had managed to close the gap and Vettel didn't have that mistake and he didn't have to slam on the brakes, maybe he might have been able to do something. But unfortunately, thanks to the FIA, we will never get to find out. From what I gather, just watching it back, watching the race again today and taking it all in, is that the stewards probably felt as though Hamilton would have got past Vettel there if Vettel did not veer so far to that side of the track, forcing Hamilton to brake. I would counter that by saying, A, he wasn't under control, and B, Hamilton doesn't have to go for that gap. He is a racing driver, he'll go for it 10 times out of 10, I guarantee it, but it's not all Vettel's fault that Hamilton found himself up against the wall in that situation. Yes, Vettel made the initial mistake, but I don't think he had any semblance of control. He's clearly in full opposite lock, and you can see another snap as he's exiting. I agree with what he said over the radio. There's nowhere for him to go. I think this is plain and simple just a bad referee, a bad stewarding call. But watching the whole race with the benefit of hindsight, it's funny how many times the commentators ironically kind of predict the future. The whole race they're going, oh, we're in for a really good race, and then they're saying, well, this fight is going to go on to the end. And it's funny watching the race replay after being there and taking it in and seeing how many times they inadvertently predict what the outcome of the race is going to possibly be. So to sum up the incident, just for some final thoughts on this, because we could talk all day about it, many people already have. I think poor call and poor outcome, and it doesn't look good for the sport. I agree with how Vettel handled it, with how upset he was, and then turning around and being the sportsman in front of the crowd and telling them to give it a break and that it's not Hamilton's fault. And I think Hamilton felt guilty about it at the end. At first, probably not as much, but then when he saw the reaction, I'm sure he did. I hope that Hamilton doesn't take that out of context and feel like it's Canadians that don't like him, or that that's a poor way for Canadians to act, because generally we're fairly polite people. I think he has to look at it like this is a crowd of hundreds of thousands that have just spent an entire weekend baking in the sun, only to have such an anticlimactic ending, where we could have had two cars really fight it out. We had a race stolen at the end of the day, and I think that it's wrong, and I hope that the FIA looks at it and that nothing like this happens over the rest of the season. And that's really all we can say about it. Thoughts on the weekend overall? I thought it was really well done. It's really well run. It's a beautiful race venue. If anybody ever gets the chance to go there, I strongly suggest you do. It's worth 10 times the price of admission. It's such a beautiful track, a beautiful park, very easy to get to the track from downtown, so it's not a huge hassle. So if ever you get the chance, I strongly suggest you do. I'm going to try to attend more in the future. It's expensive, so it's difficult to do on a budget, especially the overseas ones, but I wouldn't mind doing maybe the US Grand Prix next year, possibly, if that's in the cards. I think I'd probably go driver of the day Lance Stroll, and I would say great job from Vettel, great job from Hamilton, amazing drive. Leclerc was a little bit off, I thought. Again, Ferrari messed up. They didn't tell him about Seb's penalty, and I think that's a completely ridiculous move. I think every driver needs to know about the penalties in front of them, whether it's your team, another team, doesn't matter. Your driver should be well informed the whole race about what's going on around him. So I think he was a little bit off, but could have been helped a little bit. Bottas was like a whole minute off almost, the top guys, and he was kind of a little out there. Again, McLaren sort of disappointed from where I thought they would be. I thought Force India overall didn't do too well. Perez ended up kind of nowhere. Gasly was a little bit disappointing, but the Renaults did a seriously good job, so there was really a lot to look for. I'd probably say the overtake of the Grand Prix goes to Kvyat throwing it up the inside of Sainz. Although Sainz was, like we were saying, hurting with the brakes, I think that was an incredible move and took a lot of courage to pull off. So yeah, great job there. Great job from all of the drivers, really kept it a really clean race throughout. No major incidents, no shenanigans, just the shenanigans that the FIA came up with. So thanks for listening. Have a great day, and goodbye. Hey guys, not actually gone for good. I wanted to include a little bonus video for those of you guys that actually stick to the end. This is a crash that occurred during the Porsche GT3 Cup Challenge. This happened on the Saturday afternoon after qualifying. We had stuck around for a little bit and ventured up to the grandstand to see if we get a better view, and we caught this on camera. So just wanted to throw that in, and hopefully you enjoy.